I admit it, I can't help it. I have to go back and do another reaction to this channel because these guys, I think they are my favourite Australian import. So if you've not come across them, hopefully after you've seen this video, you'll hop over and subscribe. They are newcomers to Australia. They live up on the Gold Coast, I think it is. And they're just a really beautiful couple and they put out great videos. What more can I say? So in this video, they're talking about culture shocks that they found from moving to Australia. So let's just jump in and see what they've got to say.
Good morning from thundery Sunshine Coast. These tropical storms
they're a sight to behold.
they're amazing though. Like this morning, we woke up in bed.
Wow.
And how cosy was it being in bed when it was rumbly like this? It was really cosy being in bed.
We knew it was coming, so we'd left the window slightly ajar just to hear it, and it was very peaceful to wake up to. But pretty much all day, it's just been like this consistently.
There was a break where it was sunny and Joe was in the pool and stuff jumping in and it was fine, and then it's just come back again. I don't even know if you can see the sheer craziness. Like, you can't fully see the rain that well on camera.
So as you can see, that's probably the best perspective to see how heavy it's coming down. I'm sure you can see it on camera, but that is the craziness.
I have to say, that kind of tropical rain is just divine. Having lived most of my life in Tassie, it is such a novelty, so I can totally appreciate where they're coming from. My only observation here is, unless it was actually a thunderstorm, I would have still been in the pool. There's nothing like a really warm day being in a pool when it's raining. Maybe that's just an Australian thing and they haven't gotten that far yet, or maybe it was because they had other plans or, had finished with the pool. But if it was me, I'd be in the pool right now.
And we are now going to a photo shoot in this, which we were expecting blue skies. It's a gorgeous location. Bit of a shame it's like this.
Well, I'm sure that we can still get some great stuff inside. What the main thing is that we're going to do today in today's video is, because we're not able to get out and do too much, we kind of predicted this would be the case. So what we're going to go ahead and do is do our photo shoot, wrap up there, come back, and then basically have a sit down and a chat about cultural differences. This rain is kind of a taste of home, but
very different.
We don't get storms this crazy and this cool. Pretty much boring rain, I would say, and the heat's still there. So we're going to sit down and run through all of the differences that we've noticed as two Brits living in Queensland specifically. So some of these might not be the same as people living on the west coast of Australia, or potentially even in places like Sydney, Melbourne. These are our experiences. So we're going to run you through the cultural differences that we've noticed living in Australia for 3 months.
I'm always super appreciative when people say that, they point out that this is based on this one part of Australia. This isn't the whole of Australia. Because I've seen some doozies where they're in one part of Australia, they've not been anywhere else. And they're basically putting a video out saying this is what the entirety of Australia is like. And of course we all know Australia is so different. The Sunshine Coast is so different from Melbourne. Melbourne is so different from Bendigo, even if you talk about climate. So, there are just so many different areas of Australia that it's really great when people have the decency to mention that before they jump into this is what we see as being different kind of video.
Let's get to work.
So luckily the sun's come out, so it's looking a bit nicer for the photo shoot. It's bright, wonderful. I'm manifesting, Cody, I'm manifesting. It's gorgeous, it's wonderful. It's
So much for manifesting a bit of bright sunny weather. You just made it worse. It's the kind of rain where you almost need to pull over.
It's pretty mental. Like, I've not seen rain like this during daytime hours. It's been like this at night, but As you can see, it is absolutely hammering it down. So that is our shoot wrapped up in Noosa, and we are now probably at the nicest period of the day at 5:45. What is going on? Look, this is the nicest it's been all day, and it's nearly sunset. But we're going to go and find a little spot, have a little wander around, maybe grab a bite to eat, and have a little bit of a chat to camera about our experiences so far.
With today being a rainy day, we think we've been here long enough now that we can potentially compare some culture shocks that we've noticed since coming to Australia from the UK. So we've got quite a few on the list.
What we've done is, over the last week or so, I've actually compiled a list together of things that I've noticed, and then Cody's added some stuff as well as we've kind of gone. So these are kind of the big differences that we've noticed since living in Australia, some culture shocks as Brits coming to Australia.
Okay, just as a random segue, if they ever lose their accents, I'm going to be so disappointed. They actually remind me of an aunt that I had growing up who was from Manchester and moved to Tasmania. And it just, it's that familiarity, that hearing that accent. But it's a great accent. So hopefully they don't try and become too Australian, because I think half of the appeal here, well, not half, but it adds to the appeal having these brilliant accents.
So the first point that we wanted to bring up was how smaller towns close up really, really early. So you can't get like a takeaway in our area after like 8 p.m.
Yeah.
It's like, everything closes up early. Coffee shops are early. Coffee shops are like 2 p.m. I understand that they start earlier. That's the difference here. Like, everybody starts
Things
earlier.
get up a bit earlier, a bit sooner.
Yeah, and I think it might be for like the tradies or whatever. But yeah, that's just something again that we've noticed. Like, sometimes we'll want to go to a cafe at 2 o'clock, and we're like, oh, they're all closed.
Whereas
now.
back home in the UK, that's not the case. And now, I know some people watching might be like, oh, that's not the case in Sydney, that's not the case in some of the bigger cities, but definitely the smaller towns seem to be that way. And the thing that throws you is, in the UK, the smaller towns' coffee shops don't do that. So that's the difference. The small town kind of nature to it is a lot different. The city's probably quite similar.
I actually couldn't say if there are places in Bendigo that do that. I couldn't even speak for Melbourne, actually, because if I'm heading down to Melbourne, then, you've got a 2.5 hour travel time to get there and get back. I'm usually heading away from Melbourne by 2:30, 3 o'clock at the latest. So chances are I'm not going to be looking for a coffee shop or a bakery or anything around then. As for Bendigo, if I am going to go somewhere for a coffee or a snack or something, then I go to the Beechworth Bakery. And that, I think, is open till like 5:30 of an evening or something. But that said, if I am going to go to the beachy, I'm probably going to go there of a morning, or I might go there for lunch. So I guess maybe that explains a bit of the culture. Maybe it is more of a thing that we tend to do, that sort of thing, as a morning thing or a lunch thing, and of an afternoon we're busy doing other things maybe. But yeah, I'm not sure if it's a thing down here in Victoria, but interesting. It seems this is probably the second or third video where I've had people talking about cafes closing at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it just seems really odd to me.
So the second point I wanted to cover was actually about the coffee. Now, there's something particular about the coffee being Brit, which is, one, we're not used to the quality of coffee. The quality of coffee over here is much higher. A lot of the Aussies are known for the good quality cafes, good quality of roasting of beans. They go for a lot of organic beans. They really, really do care about it. Whereas in the UK, I wouldn't say, again, in smaller towns, it's as focused on as much as it is here. And one of the biggies is, as Brits, usually what you do when the weather is hot, you would get an iced coffee, whereas in the colder months, that's when you would get, like in your winter, because it goes down to 4, 5, even into your minuses, that's when you would get your cappuccino. That's when you would get, like, you know, your kind of hotter drinks. Whereas here, because we've just moved over, we're constantly ordering iced lattes, we're constantly ordering iced mochas, and people look at you a bit strange, like, why on earth are you doing that? So Aussies, they kind of stick to the flat whites, they stick to, like, you know, the basic black coffee, and they don't always go for the kind of fancier frappes and stuff like that.
Again, not so much my experience in like Tassie or Victoria. I mean, even down to last week, we went to Gold Class, and before our meal, we had avocados. We have the coffee over the ice cream, and it was very, very nice, I will say. And that's just kind of normal. And I will periodically go somewhere if I don't feel like a hot coffee. I'll order a frappe, and I've not really had any weird looks about it. So maybe it's just the particular places they go to, or I'd imagine there possibly are some coffee shops that don't sell as many frappes or iced lattes or stuff. I don't know. I actually would have thought that being on the Gold Coast, that those sort of iced drinks would be more popular than what they are here in Victoria.
The next point that we wanted to cover is the size. The size of the roads are much bigger than in the UK here in Australia. Like this part of Queensland, roads are much bigger, vehicles are much bigger. So you have like the big utes, you have like the Ram style cars.
Yeah.
We don't have anything like that really. Like if you see something like in the UK, that is very rare.
Yeah.
Where like every second car is like that here.
They wouldn't get down the roads. That's
No.
like the biggie, isn't it?
Yeah, the roads in the UK are so small. Like sometimes you go down in a tiny car and it's like you're even struggling to get down.
I have to say that is definitely a bonus. Although at the same time, there are some places in Australia, not a lot, that do have those narrow streets. But, just suburbs, small suburbs, like some places in Hobart where you have to pull in behind a parked car to let the other car that's coming the other way go past before you can pull out and go around. I think that's one thing I love about Bendigo is that the streets are so wide. Like, you have room for cars to be parked on the side of the road and still have heaps of room next to them. It's not just dual lanes on highways, but you have a lot of the bigger streets in the suburbs have 2 lanes. I do love that about, these bigger places that have wider streets.
The next point, which is kind of a biggie, is something that people are constantly commenting to us, and I'm glad they did at the beginning. Now we've kind of got used to it and started doing it a lot more, which is to top up on sunscreen, or as we call it, sun cream, and top up with mosquito spray. Obviously, this is something that we don't really have to deal with in the UK consistently. Maybe if you're going on holiday, you would get sun cream, but particularly in Australia, because of the UVs, because of how strong it is, it's something that they really are adamant on. A lot more. As we've been going around, we've seen a lot, like more than I've ever seen in my life, which is like skin cancer clinics and like melanoma clinics and stuff, people that are skin specialists. And you can tell that it really is something that people focus in on, make sure that you're aware of here, because as Europeans and even Brits, you're not really used to that like low level of UV, and no doubt you could end up doing yourself some damage. Yeah. So constantly being topped up on sun cream and mosquito spray is something we don't really do in the UK, and that has been a big change.
Okay, I like that these guys are actually accepting the fact that they need to keep topping up sunscreen and that they need their mossy repellent. There was a recent video that I did where the couple they didn't really get why Australians were telling them to wear sunscreen. And I think they were a bit put out by the fact that a lot of their subscribers kept telling them to put on sunscreen and wear sunscreen, put on hats, yada yada. Whereas these guys get it. It is. We say it because we understand the dangers here of skin cancer. It's the skin cancer capital of the world. So, we're not trying to be twats by telling people to put on sunscreen. It's just that, we know.
Another thing that we've noticed is the supermarkets are a little bit more pricey here. Not by much, but a little bit more pricey. But eating out is probably equivalent or cheaper.
Yeah.
So like some cuisines, so like Thai food and Japanese food are more readily available here.
Yeah.
And it's a lot cheaper than in the UK, like by quite a bit more. So yeah, it kind of balances out. You find that you are available to eat out a bit more. Well, we are personally, obviously everyone's different. Just simply because of how much it does cost to go to the supermarkets anyway.
Definitely. It doesn't seem to be cheaper, does it? Like you said, the supermarkets seem to be like, if not just as or more expensive than back home. So you don't feel like you're getting a good deal.
Yeah.
But you eat out at a place and you're like, oh, this is a bargain. You end up buying.
Yeah.
And it ends up costing you probably more because you're eating out a lot more than you usually used to.
I have to say, in terms of supermarkets, in the last 12 months, I've been shopping far less at Woolies and Coles because of their prices, and most of my groceries I will get from Aldi or from our local IGA. I mean, it used to be that IGA was always a bit more expensive than the bigger chains because they didn't have the buying power. But now I actually do like a fortnightly shop at IGA. That's my biggest shop. I also do a fortnightly shop at Aldi. They're my two big shops. And then there's only a small handful of things that I'll get from Coles because I can't get them at IGA or Aldi. But yeah, it seems like the cost of groceries has definitely gone up more than the cost of some kinds of restaurants. I know a lot of the Asian restaurants around here are still really good value, and of course the Thai restaurants, Japanese restaurants, they're all still really good value, which is great because one of my favourite things is like a Thai green curry. And there's a place here that does the most divine Thai green curry that is like, I think it's $20. It's enough for 2 people for a meal. Utterly divine. So I understand what they're saying. If you're going to buy all the ingredients from the supermarket to make a really good Thai green curry, it's probably going to cost you just about that much again. Last week when my sister was coming over for dinner, it was 37, 38 degrees, so I didn't want to cook. So I made sushi. By the time I had gone and bought proper jasmine rice, proper nori, and, various bits and pieces for in the sushi, it probably would have been just as cheap for me to buy our sushi from the sushi place that's directly outside Woolies. So, obviously I've still got plenty more jasmine rice and plenty more nori, so, I can still make far more sushi, but, at the end of the day, I mean, $2.50 for an avocado, that's halfway to buying, or more than halfway to buying one of those sushi rolls from the little sushi shop outside Woolies. That's before you pay for anything else.
So specifically here in Queensland where we're living on the Sunshine Coast, there isn't too much of a change during the daylight hours over a year. This is something that we've actually experienced as the seasons have changed. And also a huge one is that they don't actually partake in daylight saving hours.
No, it's quite unusual,
So
isn't it?
you
for
don't
us?
lose an hour or gain an hour any time during the year, whereas in the UK, that is something that you do. But it makes sense to do it in the UK because in the winter, it goes dark at 3 o'clock. And then in the summer, it goes dark at 10 o'clock at night. So that span is a full 7 hours of light changing through the year. Whereas here, you probably gain about an hour or maybe 2 hours of light here and there between the two differences at like its max and its difference, I think.
It's not too different. is
Yeah,
it?
it might change a little bit more than that, but the change up in light has not really shifted too much. So it does make sense. I know a couple of the other states and territories do that as well. So for example, we're quite close in like the grand scheme of like a car journey to New South Wales, and New South Wales do change the time. So they do have daylight saving hours. So it is a bit peculiar how you can be in the same country. Some states and territories do it, some states and territories don't, I think. So it can be a bit confusing if you're not used to it as a Brit.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's only Queensland, Northern Territory, and Western Australia that don't do daylight savings, and that every other state does. I do remember something in the media years and years ago where I think it was a Queensland politician had basically, they were talking about introducing daylight savings in Queensland, and I think it was a politician or someone said that they didn't want to do daylight savings in Queensland because it would fade the curtains. Good one. I have to say, um, it hadn't occurred to me that they had so much more daylight there in Queensland, but it makes sense because even just from going from Tassie to Bendigo, in Tassie, in the middle of winter, you leave for work in the dark, you get home in the dark, and you have that part of winter in Tassie where it's dark at 5 o'clock, whereas in Bendigo that doesn't happen here. It, you know, I used to count down the days to the shortest day in Tassie because then you would know that the days were going to start getting longer and you'd eventually be moving out of those really short days. Whereas here in Bendigo, since I moved here, I forget to worry about whatever day is the shortest day or the longest day because you do have so much more daylight. And especially, you know, over winter, the difference is huge because you're not in the dark at 5 o'clock at night. And now when I think about that, I think, was that really the case in Tassie? Because, like, to me, it just seems really unnatural now because it doesn't happen that way here in Bendigo. And yet, from what they're saying, they get even more daylight in Queensland, which is a far greater distance from Bendigo to Queensland than it is from Bendigo to Tassie. So, that really does make a lot of sense.
The next point, that if you've watched one of the previous videos, you know that I got very excited about, and it is air in your tyres being free. I don't want to wish this on Australia to ever have to pay for it, ever, ever, ever. So I hope, word doesn't get out
That's
about
it.
it. But in the UK, you do have to pay, and it can be as
At a
much
service
as
station, you
at a
pay to
service
pump up your
station.
tyres.
And it can be anything from equivalent in dollars, it'd be like $1 to $4 to do it. Believe it or not, it's really expensive, and so that really shocked me.
Yeah, bugger that. I wouldn't be paying for air for my tyres. I don't think they could ever get away with introducing that in Australia because the backlash would be phenomenal. I think if they did start doing that, I would probably just be, or out of principle, I would buy my own air compressor and keep it in the boot of my car. I mean, I used to actually have an air compressor because of the roads that I used to travel. When you're travelling 100 k's or so early in the morning or late in the afternoon and you're miles from a service station, it's good to have an air compressor in your car just in case you do have issues with tyres. But imagine having to pay for compressed air. That's just pure greed. That's all it is.
And another one on that about things being free are the poo bags. Like, as a dog owner, it makes a huge difference having dog poo bags available all the time. Like, we have dog poo bags anyway, like attached to the lead. But it's so handy that if you run out or you need more or you're picking up other people's dog poo.
Yeah, which we did.
Which
we did that the other day.
So yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, I guess that's something that I've kind of started to take for granted is that the places that where you do take your dogs, most of the time there is going to be a bag dispenser on a pole somewhere. I must admit, I always have a spare bag tied around the handle for the dog lead, and I also have the clip on thing with more bags in it. But it is convenient sometimes to be able to just grab a bag from a dispenser, especially if you've accidentally grabbed the wrong dog lead out of your car and you don't actually have any doggy bags.
And then another one is the barbecues, the free facilities for grilling and barbecues. Not something that we have in the UK, and if we did, I feel like they get vandalised. I'm sure you've had issues where yours have been vandalised as well, unfortunately, but it would be a consistent issue that our councils probably wouldn't pay for. And so all those three things being free is a massive, massive difference, I think.
Huge.
Small things make a big difference when you're living somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So, public barbecues never used to be free. You used to always have to put your coins in. But I guess because they got vandalised so often, it was probably cheaper for councils to just make them free, which is such a good thing, really. I should probably, someone needs to advise these guys though that if you're going to go have a barbecue, take your own foil to put over the barbecue because you just don't really know how clean it is.
You know, you pay taxes and it just kind of makes like you're happier to pay taxes when you've got things like this, you know, free facilities. Three really good.
Something that Aussies might not even really recognise as well, and there's probably a few other things like the whole point of like water fountains being so readily available.
And toilets.
So the public toilets aren't just on coastal towns, they're also inland at small towns that we've been to and visited that maybe aren't as tourist friendly. So it's just nice to see that these public toilets are in place, because back in the UK, if you are in these kind of public places, even more so in a city centre, if you do want to go to a toilet, you have to go into an establishment, a pub, a restaurant, and like kind of awkwardly ask, am I okay to use the toilet? And this is actually something that you face in Europe as well. The thing is, in Europe, is in a lot of European countries and cities that we've been to, they have public toilets, but you have to go in and pay. Whereas here, they're just there and readily available. So it's a nice touch.
I love that not only do we have readily accessible public toilets in every town and every city, but you can actually access it on like Wiki Maps or even on Google Maps. You can type in public toilet and it'll tell you where the nearest public toilet is. And having to pay for them in Europe, another total scam. Like, you know, I'm sure they charge locals rates. So why make people pay to use public toilets? I don't know, maybe that's just because it's just something that would never happen here in Australia. But it just, to me, it just seems unbelievable.
So the next point is about the bins getting collected. So where we live in a small town in Manchester, the bins get collected now every 3 weeks.
And this is recycling bins as well.
Yeah,
This
so it
is
never
not
used
just-
to be.
yeah.
It never used to be that way, but unfortunately due to cutbacks that is now the case. So with the bins being collected here every week, that is one of the things we noticed when we first got here, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
We
I'm
were
not
like-
sure whether this is the consistent for every place in Australia. Other people might tell us otherwise, but it was a big change up. We kind of like started speaking to people that we were like the guys that live upstairs and stuff from where we live. And as we were speaking to them, we were like, wait, the bins are out again? They're getting collected again this week? And they were like, yeah, they get taken weekly. And we're like, that's every 3 weeks, including recycling. So each bin, even if it's a different separate recycling bin, only gets collected on a schedule of once every 3 weeks. And it's very odd.
So all their bins are collected on a weekly basis. That's pretty cool. Here in Bendigo, you have your red bin, which is rubbish, collected fortnightly, and then on the weeks that that's not collected, your recycling is collected. And they've recently introduced that they actually collect your green bin every week. It used to be that the red bins went out every week and then you alternated between the recycling and the green, but they've switched it up now and your red bin only goes out fortnightly, like on alternate weeks from your recycling. But yeah, to have them going out every week, that would be kind of cool. I wouldn't need to put mine out every week, but at least it would mean that if I forgot to put my bin out one week, I wouldn't be stuck with it for another fortnight when it's full.
The next point is speaking about the birds. Now, specifically, not just birds in nature, we've actually done that in another video, but speaking about how all the birds here attacked you and other birds. Now, that's not something we've really ever experienced. Birds attacking each other, like you'll be driving a car and you'll be like, oh wait, another bird's attacking another bird, and it could be small, big, you know, whatever kind of birds. They seem to all like be fighting for just like location and area, but then also the bird call is quite strong as well. So we spoke to somebody from Australia before we came out living here, and they were saying what their personal thought is that the birds in Australia kind of have like an attacking bird call, whereas the bird call in the UK is more of a kind of quieter, relaxed sound, and they kind of like, there's a bit of a symphony to it, and this is an Australian's take. And then we didn't really know what they meant, and then since we've come out we kind of know what they mean. But the weird thing is for us as Brits, because we're used to the kind of bird call back home, it's lovely and all. When you come out here now living as a Brit, we love hearing the different kind of bird call because we're not used to it, because it's so fresh. It really does sound so different, like kookaburras and the cockatoos, just so loud and in your face, but it's a new experience and we love it.
Yeah, I must admit there's a real assortment of birds around my place. I tend not to notice them so much now because I've been here for so long, but yeah, some of them can be kind of noisy buggers.
We're back on track with our steps now, and the next point is about how you guys are quite proud to have stuff in the supermarkets labelled as grown in Australia,
Yeah.
and just very supportive of
Made
like,
in Australia,
made in
like I said,
Australia, even just supporting small businesses. It's all, I love it, it's great, and that's definitely more apparent than in the UK. As you might know, like in the UK we rely quite heavily on like Amazon. Amazon's like absolutely smashed every day. Like you can order something today, get it by tonight.
And I'm sure that's the case in the bigger cities, but where we're currently
Yeah.
living, it's really quite quiet in comparison to the bustle and what we would kind of call the rat race. You call it the rat race, don't you, back home, where everybody's kind of got to be somewhere, nobody's ever happy where they are. That kind of lifestyle off that point, it's not really seen here. It might be in some of the bigger cities, even Brisbane, for example, Sydney, Melbourne. But here, it's a lot more of a relaxed, kind of chilled lifestyle. And that suits us currently, down to a T.
I actually think there probably needs to be another push for Buy Australian because since COVID it has become so easy to just buy what you need online. And I know here in Bendigo there have been so many shops that have closed since COVID, shops that you would have previously expected to just continue on and on, like, you know, variety stores that had been there forever. And people just, you know, they were buying stuff online. And then, of course, the cost of living has gone up. So places like that have just become far less viable because it is so much cheaper to buy stuff online. So, yeah, I think while there has traditionally been this push to buy Australian, I think they probably need to start really pushing it again if they're going to prevent more small businesses from going under.
And as we walk past a basketball court, we're going to say one of our last points, And one of our last points is actually about the sport. Now, sport out here is pretty different, but quite similar in certain ways to the UK. The ways in which it's similar, for example, cricket, rugby league, rugby union, all very popular in the UK and all very popular out here. But one of the biggies that I've noticed is people like to play soccer. Obviously, the name's a big difference, but soccer, football back in the UK is the biggest sport. Like, hands down, it's the sport that the majority of kids at school are playing, the majority of kids are watching. I would say probably around about 80% of kids have a team at school.
Yeah.
Whereas here, I don't even know if they do. They might kind of have a team, but it's a lot more. There's AFL, which isn't really around in the UK. Rugby league, where we are currently, is massive. Cricket, and you see a lot of people playing basketball. You see a lot of people playing soccer, but maybe not watching it directly as much. I'm guessing it's on the grow, but it's still, in the UK, it's different levels. And trying to watch it
Watching it
as a Brit,
there's only one team to watch, so if you are a soccer fan, comment below and let us know who you support.
I know
there's only one team.
There's a couple of Scousers watching, a couple of Liverpool fans, and I'm glad that you're watching, but when it comes to football, we might have to disagree.
Yeah, I think there are some die-hard soccer fans in Australia, but for most part it does come down to AFL or rugby, doesn't it? And of course cricket, but even cricket's not as popular as footy, I don't think. So I won't include their outro because, well, that's their outro. So that brings us to the end of the video. I don't think there were really a lot of surprises there. I have to say it's cool that their bins are collected every week. Every 3 weeks in the UK, or at least in their part of Manchester, sounds not enough. But I mean, here fortnightly is fine, but I must admit it's been an adjustment with our red bins, like our regular rubbish bins, adjusting to having them collected fortnightly. And for me, that's not so much about that my bin is always chockers, it's about that I now have to remember to put it out, because if I don't, it's going to be another fortnight before it is collected, and then it will be chockers. I think most other things are things that I'd heard. I hadn't even considered the fact that Queensland doesn't do daylight savings. I mean, we all know that Queensland doesn't do daylight savings because, they don't want to fade their curtains. But, yeah, I hadn't really put much thought into that. So, thanks for listening. If you're new, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button. And leave a comment below. Is there anything from this video that you found surprising? Things that you perhaps didn't know? Or are there things that are different on the Sunshine Coast to where you live in Australia? Or if you live in another country, how is it different? I love reading people's comments, and I look forward to reading your comments and responding to them. So, thanks, and I'll catch you in the next one.